Ask yourself how old you are right now, and the answer arrives instantly. An exact number, no hesitation. That number is anchored to a specific calendar date, recorded the day you were born, checked against official documents more times than you could count. For almost all of human history, none of that existed. No calendar date, no birth certificate, no exact number waiting to be recalled. So how did anyone actually know how old they were? Start with a strange fact. The people best equipped to answer that question about ancient humans aren't ancient humans at all. They're modern researchers working backward from bones. It's worth sitting with how strange that really is. You know your own age the moment you're asked without having to think about it at all. It's simply part of how you carry your own identity. Imagine that entire category of self-knowledge missing, not because anyone forgot, but because the tool for holding it had never been invented yet where you happen to be born. When archaeologists recover a skeleton, one of the most reliable places they look is a small joint at the front of the pelvis called the pubic symphysis. In 1990, researchers Judy Suchey and Suchey-Brooks published a staging system, now called the Suchey-Brooks method, that tracks how this joint's surface changes shape in a fairly predictable pattern across adulthood. Rough and ridged in early adulthood, smoothing and eroding with age. Paired with tooth wear and how fully the growth plates at the ends of long bones have fused, forensic and bioarchaeological researchers can now estimate how old a skeleton was, often within a several-year range, even when it's tens of thousands of years old. None of that information ever passed through the person's own awareness while they were alive. Nobody in deep prehistory ever looked at their own pelvis and thought, stage 4 must be in my late 30s. The method works precisely because human bodies age in fairly predictable biological stages, whether or not anyone tracking those stages knew what a year even was. It's a real, well-validated method, and it makes an important point just by existing. This information had to be reconstructed entirely after the fact by people who never met the person it belonged to. That's the real puzzle underneath the question. It's not really, how did ancient humans track their age? It's whether the concept of tracking your age as a specific number was something most of your ancestors even had. Tracking a number requires two things you probably take completely for granted: a fixed starting point, a specific day zero everyone agrees to count from, and a shared, stable unit to count in afterward, the year. Both of those are inventions. Neither one is automatic, and for the overwhelming majority of the time humans have existed, neither one had been built yet. For the vast majority of human history, there was no birth registry, no numbered calendar shared across a whole society, no reliable way to count years passing at all. And in a lot of documented traditional societies, that gap wasn't experienced as a gap. It was just handled a completely different way. The anthropologist Evans-Pritchard spent extended time in the 1930s among the Nuer, a cattle-herding people in what's now South Sudan, and wrote one of anthropology's most cited accounts of exactly this. The Nuer, he found, tracked time through two systems running side by side. One was ecological, the rhythm of the day structured around milking cattle, the rhythm of the year structured around wet and dry seasons. The other was structural, time organized around age sets, named cohorts of people initiated into adulthood together, roughly a decade apart from the set before and after them. Someone could tell you an event happened during the initiation period of a particular named age set. Almost nobody could tell you how many actual years ago that was. Evans-Pritchard described the Nuer as having, in his words, few well-defined units of time at all and functioning perfectly well without them. That's not a gap in knowledge. It's a genuinely different architecture for locating yourself in time, organized around social relationships and life stages instead of a running numeric count. And the Nuer weren't unusual in this. Age-set systems like theirs, where cohorts move together through named life stages marked by shared initiation rather than individual birth dates, show up independently across dozens of documented pastoralist and agricultural societies throughout East Africa and beyond, from the Maasai to the Kikuyu. Different peoples, different specific customs, but the same underlying solution to the same underlying problem. You don't need a number to know your place, if your place is defined by who else moved through life alongside you. Here's the part that might surprise you most, though. Even after written numbers, calendars, and record-keeping spread widely, most ordinary people still didn't reliably know their own exact age for a very long time afterward. Economic historian Joerg Baten has spent years studying a pattern demographers call age heaping. In old census and record data, when people were asked their age, answers cluster suspiciously around round numbers: 30, 40, 50. Far more than you'd expect if everyone actually knew their precise age and reported it. Baten and other researchers have used the strength of this rounding pattern, measured with a tool called Whipple's Index, as an actual proxy for basic numeracy across historical populations. The stronger the heaping toward round numbers, the less reliably people in that population actually knew, or had ever needed to know, their own exact age. This isn't ancient prehistory. Some of this data comes from populations within the last few centuries, in places that already had census officials walking door to door with pen and paper, asking the question directly and still getting an approximate answer back far more often than an exact one. Think about what that implies. Even the invention of writing, even the invention of the calendar, even the invention of the census didn't automatically hand ordinary people a precise number for their own age. That habit had to spread further still through widespread literacy, through routine paperwork, through decades of being asked the question often enough that the exact answer became second nature. Your own instant certainty about your age isn't ancient. It's closer to being one of the most recent parts of your entire identity. There's also a quieter question worth asking here. If nobody could tell you exactly how old they were, did anyone actually need to? In small, closely lived-in communities, most of what a number is used for today, deciding who's old enough for which responsibilities, who's owed respect as an elder, who's ready for marriage or full adult status, was handled directly through observation and shared ritual instead. You didn't need to check a birth certificate to know someone had grown into a certain role. You watched them go through the initiation everyone else your rough cohort went through. And after that, the question of your exact numeric age simply had nothing left to answer that mattered day to day. Put all three pieces together, and a clearer picture forms. Bioarchaeologists can now assign a number to an ancient skeleton using methods like Suchey-Brooks, but that number was never something the living person carried around in their own head. Societies like the Nuer show that a fully functional social order doesn't require anyone to count years at all. Status, responsibility, and rank can be organized around life stages and named cohorts instead. And even once numeric ages became common, most ordinary people, for a startlingly long stretch of more recent history, still only had a rough sense of their own number, not a precise one. The instant, exact answer you gave at the very start, that's not some fixed feature of being human. It's a comparatively recent habit, built on written records and calendars your distant ancestors, and even a lot of your much more recent ancestors, never had. They knew who they were, what stage of life they were in, and what that meant for the people around them. They just weren't carrying a number to prove it. That number now sits so deep in how you think about yourself that its absence is hard to even picture properly, but it's worth remembering. Next time someone asks how old you are, and the answer arrives without a second of thought, that the thoughtlessness itself is the unusual part. A piece of infrastructure so recently built into how humans understand themselves that almost nobody who ever lived before you had access to it at all.